It's that time when bad is good and terrible is even better. Yes, it's this week's Zaius Report, your weekly look at cult movies and other crap. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your host, the movie man who knows it all and where the bodies are buried. His horrorness, the Prince of Slime, the original invader for Mars himself, the man for whom the phrase B-grade was invented. Welcome, Zaius.
Well, welcome to podcast number 9. Yes, I think it's number 9 of the Zaius Report. With myself, Warren, and of course, sitting next to me, well, metaphorically, I suppose, Gary.
Hey, girl, hey.
Great to have you here again for, podcast number 9, as I said. And we've got some great stuff to talk about this podcast. Some fantastic cult movies. But I suppose before we do anything, I did just want to mention it was very sad this week to hear of the passing of the great man Gene Wilder.
Mm-hmm.
So many fantastic movies. Also, such a great writer, such a director. And for me personally, Young Frankenstein is still up there with one of my favourite, not just favourite comedies, but almost favourite movies of all time.
Mine is Haunted Honeymoon.
Sorry, which one?
Haunted Honeymoon was mine.
Oh, it's just just the collaborations he used to work with Mel Brooks, but even just his work with Richard Pryor, he was just absolutely fantastic. He will be sadly missed.
Definitely.
Most definitely.
And we need to give a shout out to Willy Wonka.
Oh, yes. Yes. I've got a quick story actually about that film. I can still remember working in an office and many years ago, and it had a factory, where it used to manufacture steel things and stuff like that. And I can still remember I was out with the boss one day, and he was telling me that the guys out in the factory usually went out and had, drinks on a Friday night and all this sort of stuff. Used to get pissed and all the rest of it. But not this particular Friday night. They were all racing home because Charlie and the Chocolate Factory was on TV. All these big buff steel workers were going home to watch Charlie and the Chocolate Factory.
They should.
What a fantastic movie. I mean, it was just so family. There was something for everybody. There was stuff for adults, stuff for children. Just brilliant.
And a crap remake.
Oh, yes. I'm sorry, sorry, Mr. Depp. No. It should never have been done. It should never have been done. No. Moving on. Anyway, we've got our first film. And
first cab off the rank.
Yes, first cab up. And we're going to go for some retro B-grade. And it is The Blob. Yes.
Blob.
Oh, could you do us the theme tune, Gary? Can you remember it?
Oh, no, I knew this would happen when it's recording. Everywhere are the blob, it creeps and leaps and glides and slides across the floor right through the door and all around the wall a blotch. Be careful of the blob. Boop.
Oh, perfect. Yay. Round of applause.
Twice flawlessly before we pressed record, and then the second it was on, it was like, damn.
That's always the way. Isn't it? But The Blob, I think, look, so many people have seen this film that I'm not even really too worried about giving the ending away to this because...
there really isn't that much to give away,
no.
Really.
No. I mean, it's... I think everyone's either seen it or heard of it. It was, of course, even remade. I believe there was twice. I believe there was a sequel to The Blob.
Yes, done by Larry Hagman, of all people.
Yeah.
It was called Son of Blob. Beware of Blob. Beware of Blob. And then there was Son of Blob.
Son of Blob.
Son of Blob.
I just love it.
And then,
it was remade then again in the 80s, wasn't it?
1988, yeah, which is probably one of the best remakes that's ever been made, to be honest.
I must admit, the remake gets much more sort of gory, doesn't it? I mean, it's actually quite a bit of blood and goo in the remake. But I suppose we should get back to the original, which is what we're talking about. And, of course, directed by Ivan Yeworth, I think, from 1958, and starring, of course, Steve McQueen.
He was probably in his 30s playing a 14-year-old.
Well, he was. I actually looked it up yesterday, and he was actually 27 when they made the movie. But, of course, he's playing a 17-year-old. So there's a little bit of the Beverly Hills 90210 thing sort of going on there.
There is a strange bit in the middle where his father sends him to his room and he's like, he's 27, mate.
I know. The other thing, too, I do love it is when he actually creeps out of his bedroom. He can hear his parents talking on the other side of the wall, but they don't hear him, like, open up the window and climb down the rafters and, open up the garage and drive the car out. The other thing too, is if the walls are that thin, maybe it explains why he's an only child.
Possibly.
You know what I mean? I'll say no more. But we should actually, I suppose, go into a little bit more depth about what the film is about. And it's set actually in 1957, so actually the year it would have been filmed and then, of course, released in 1958. And it did actually have a second title, which was called The Molten Meteor, which I didn't realise until I actually looked it up. And it's a story of our two heroes, or hero and heroine, I suppose, if you like, one of which is, of course, Steve McQueen. And they're off on a date, and they see a shooting star or a meteorite sort of crash just outside of town. So they go off to investigate, but before they can get there, this sort of lone farmer, I suppose we'll call him a farmer, I think he's more of some sort of redneck hillbilly or something, that sort of lives outside of town.
They did a nice homage to him in Killer Clowns from Outer Space, if you've ever seen that. We'll talk about that later, and we'll talk about that later. But otherwise, we're going to digress so much. Because we haven't even explained the film yet, and I think we've been going for 5 minutes. But there's a lot of links to the Blob all over the.
There definitely are. We'll get all that to that in just a second. But
anyway, farmer, yeah, go on.
Yes. Anyway, so this farmer redneck, sort of, we've got strutting banjos probably around him, and he goes off and he finds the meteor, and almost in a little bit sort of like Alien style, this thing opens up. This pod opens up with this almost like goo. It basically just looks like a piece of silly putty or
jelly.
Jelly. Yes, jelly. Yeah. Jelly or jello for our North American listeners. And anyway, so he decides to prod it with a stick, and of course it gets on his hand and starts to take over his body. And this thing is just like a flesh-eating goo. It just dissolves and, eats everything. And of course...
It's like a Kardashian in its original form.
No comment. I'm just moving on. So anyway, our hero and heroine find him and take him to the local doctors, and a whole heap of other stuff basically starts to happen. But he gets consumed by the Blob, and then of course it goes and consumes the nurse. It then consumes the doctor. Steve McQueen runs off with his girlfriend to try and tell the police. The police, of course, don't believe him. They just think he's, these pesky
Something
kids.
happened to the dog.
Yes. And of course, then they have to go off and try to prove to the town that this monster blob really does exist. And, of course, in the end, they do prove it, and then the town has to try to destroy this creature. Oh, I got through it.
Well done.
Yes. So, what do you think about this? Because you rewatched this only recently, didn't you? I think.
Yeah,
Gary?
it's one of my favourite 50s B movies. I've loved it for years. I recently picked it up on Blu-ray and saw it again. I love it. I can watch it on a loop. It doesn't bother me the slightest. It's so entertaining. It's bad, but it's fun at the same time. I mean, a little known fact before I forget it, because it'll go out of my head and I'll regret not saying it. It was actually released as a double feature with I Married a Monster from Outer Space, and it's one of the rare occasions where the actual B movie, because it was the B movie, I Married a Monster from Outer Space, with the A movie. It was actually one of the rare instances where the B movie outgrossed the A movie.
That's just amazing, isn't it? That's just absolutely amazing. For me, I've actually found that this movie, I remember I went to see it once as a triple feature with Robot Monster and Plan 9 from Outer Space. And I just think it was so harsh, because The Blob is actually so much better than those other two movies. I mean, Plan 9 and Robot Monster really are appallingly bad. Although I still love them, though. I absolutely love them. But The Blob actually still stands up, I think.
It stands out. It feels like a sort of big studio picture from that time period. I mean, it's right up there with, like, It Came from Outer Space and Earth versus the Flying Saucers and things like that. It feels the same quality as they do. It doesn't feel like a B-movie in the slightest.
I totally agree. I mean, it is, to me, a bit like you just mentioned it, with special effects by Harry Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I'm so sorry, I just had one of those moments. I have them all the time. But anyway, it does feel like, yes, there's it's a much bigger budget movie than it actually is. The other thing too that I found interesting is that there is a scene towards the end where our heroes, if you like, are trapped in the basement of a diner in the small country town, and the Blob has basically, it's all over the diner, and it's slowly coming inside the diner, and it's going to consume them. And
which is funny, because it looks like a mobile diner. You wouldn't think there would be a basement on it.
Yes, I know. I know. Also, if you have a look at the size of the window when they're inside to the size of the window when they're outside, it does change quite considerably. The window looks like it's about 3 meters long when they're inside, but from the outside, it's about, I'd be lucky if it's half a meter wide. But as they're trying to, they don't know whether they're going to survive, obviously, but something happens. Of course, they realise that cold is the enemy of this creature. But what I really did find interesting is when everyone thinks that they can't get them out of this basement, the movie actually gets quite, very serious and very dark. We almost, for a B movie, we almost start to actually feel like invested with these characters, which is very unusual in a B movie. Even the rest of the actors, it's almost quite sad. I don't know if you found that or if that was just me.
No, it is definitely there. It's got a lot of heart to it. It's not just the usual sort of teenagers in peril B movie.
No, that's the. I think that's what is so interesting about it. It's still got a lot of that sort of pesky teenagers.
This was during the sort of like where they were all rebellious, weren't they? And like, the police hated them, and they were like the scum of the earth. These teenagers with their own free will.
Yeah. But the thing is, they're the best behaved teenagers in the world.
They really are.
I mean, they're
like rebels without a clue.
That's exactly right. They're not running around burning down the town. They're not graffitiing the town. They're not getting drunk. They're not doing drugs. They're not doing burglaries. The worst thing they're doing is racing their cars on a Saturday night. I mean,
which is even done in a sort of where it starts off relatively threatening with these gang of kids who will like want to race them, and then at the end, and they lose. It's like, oh well, you got us. That wouldn't happen.
That's very true. You do feel at the start like the gang of boys are the enemy of Steve McQueen. But you realise that they're actually all friends. It is, and they're more than willing to help on the hunt for the monster where they go out. But one thing I do have to admit, there are certain scenes where our monster, the Blob, does actually just look like a giant red blancmange. Just moving around. And in other scenes, it looks like red currant jelly In other scenes, it looks almost a little bit like dyed shaving cream. It doesn't.
Basically, it's silicone with red vegetable dye.
Oh, is that what was used?
Yeah.
It's and I did notice too that quite a bit of reverse camera action, or reverse film. So if it's attacking somebody and then suddenly it decides to move away, they just reverse the footage.
Yeah, it's easier to pull something out of the blob than it is to put something into the blob.
But I did find it interesting. I do know that there's the scene with the doctor that after they try to throw acid on it and it doesn't do anything, he decides to get his shotgun. And, I mean, how are you going to kill a giant walking blancmange with a shotgun? I realise that you don't know how to stop this thing, but how are you going to stop a blancmange with a shotgun? It is pretty funny, but and I do think that a lot of the characters too in this movie are really good. I mean, I like the way that in the police department you've got a sheriff who's sort of an old timer, an old world character who. He doesn't really understand the kids, but he trusts the kids. Like he thinks that they're actually good at heart. They're not actually bad. And then you've got his deputy, or what is he? He's a sergeant or whatever. But he's sort of meant to be the deputy. And of course he's Annette's war hero. And I think was the story his wife was meant to have been run over by one of the kids in the past.
Yes, it was sort of. That was in the original treatment, if I remember correctly.
And so he's never forgiven them. So he mistrusts them, and he thinks everybody's jealous because he's a war hero and all this sort of stuff. So we've got these really quite interesting characters. Of course, the father of Steve McQueen's love interest just happens to be the school principal. It's a very small town, it must be said.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody does seem to sort of know everybody, and I think the other thing too, what is also interesting about it is that when, of course, one of the things about this movie is that the Blob finally gets sort of when they realise that this thing is actually real, is when it attacks everybody inside the cinema. And
which is one of the most famous scenes in B-movie history.
Oh, I just love it when it comes out of the, what do they call it? The windows where they shine the camera light through. Projection booth. And it honestly just looks like somebody's just got the silicon and just made a little box and then just got a piece of wood and just gone thump and just pushed it out.
There's a woman in the audience that makes me laugh in that cinema as well. You see her on the trailer as well. So if you don't feel like watching the film, you'll see this woman on the trailer where 1 second she's laughing at the film, then all of a sudden she just goes completely deadpan and stops. It's like somebody just yelled cut at that exact moment. It's like 1 minute she's smiling from ear to ear and the next minute it's gone completely. It's the most bizarre looking moment I've ever seen in a film.
Does it remind you a little bit of that famous scene from, I can't remember what movie it was, but when a gun is about to be fired in a restaurant, and you can see one of the extras, a small kid, actually put his fingers in his ears just before the gun goes off. I've forgotten the name of that movie.
Watching Q the Winged Serpent recently as well. They're filming a bit on the streets of New York, and there's like a line of people behind them, and they're all just pointing at the camera and smiling. So they're talking about like this person who's died window washing, and then it's just these two old ladies that are just pointing and looking at the camera.
My goodness, Q the Winged Serpent. I haven't seen that in so long.
We need to do that one soon.
Because that stars. I've forgotten his name now. Is it David Carradine?
Yeah.
And I still remember I'm sure there's a line in that where, because he plays the police detective, I think, doesn't he? And yes, he actually makes the line where he says, "Have you ever seen a man skinned alive?" It's like, oh yes, every day, It's like I go to work and I see people skinned alive all the time.
That's New York. Anybody who's ever tried to do a commute in New York will tell you this. happens all the time.
That is that. We must do that film. Actually, that is a great one. Actually, that really is a great one. But there's a couple of other things I just wanted to mention about the Blob very quickly, and that is, of course, that because it's a sort of a B grade sort of monster horror movie, if you like, from the late 50s. It, of course, plays on that whole idea of paranoia, which was around, especially in the United States, at that time. And where these films, I think, worked so well was that it was very, very easy to scare an audience back then, because if you were filling a cinema with people who were already scared and paranoid, because of the Cold War, you had, Cuba and all the rest of it, it was like the movie didn't actually have to be that bad to scare them, because they were already half petrified before they went in. And there's a wonderful movie starring John Goodman called The Matinee.
Matinee. I'm getting it on Blu-ray next month.
It is absolutely fantastic, and it talks about this entire subject, about the B movie during that sort of paranoia of the Cold War. And it's a
tribute to William Castle as well, isn't it?
Yes. And it's a fantastic little movie. It's for anyone who is into these sorts of sort of B grade, older, sort of more retro movies. Matinee is definitely one that you have to see. Although I will just warn some people: if you're going to look it up, or if you're going to buy it, or whatever, make sure that you're buying the American version. Don't, unfortunately, buy yourself a British movie called Matinee, because it is a very, 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 very different movie.
Well, the best thing about bringing Matinee up at the moment is that Arrow Video are releasing it in the US and the UK on Blu-ray in September this month. So,
fantastic!
Hold out and get that one. But the best thing about the Blu-ray, which I'm glad that they've ported it over from the DVD, is they're putting the full version of Mant on there, which is the film that is the parody film they're making in the actual movie. So you get to see the full version of Mant. Which is about a man being turned into an ant.
Worth every cent. Any idea how much it's worth?
It's going to be about $19.99.
That is in US dollars?
That's UK pounds.
Oh, UK pounds.
Roughly about $19.99 in America, sometimes up to about $22.
Okay. But look, considering what you're getting, that's actually pretty good value, I think, because...
Yeah, there's a hell of a lot of extras on it, and I've been informed that it's going to look amazing as well. But, I mean, I'm doing a review for it soon on bodycamrising.com.
Just get that plug in there. No, it's... that's brilliant. Oh, look, I'll be getting my own copy, I think. That's brilliant.
Talking about the Cold War connection with the Blob, I mean, I've just this was on Wikipedia. According to Jeff Charlotte in his book *The Family*, the Blob was about the creeping horrors of communism, only defeated by freezing it. The Cold War writ small and literal. So,
very, very interesting.
I think most of the B movies from the 50s are about the exact same thing. I mean, the War of the Worlds, 1953, basically all you have to do is replace the word Martian with Russian. You've got the, the Cold War.
Oh, without any doubt. I mean, there's so many of these movies from this period which are really just statements about the Cold War, about, America versus, the Soviet Union. It's absolutely fascinating. That
it makes you want it to happen again, so we can have some decent B movies back.
Well, if you think about it, now is actually the perfect time, because I mean I don't think the West anyway has been quite so paranoid as it is now since probably the 1950s.
Yeah,
because I think that if you were to go through the 70s and the 80s. You still had that fear of, of nuclear annihilation. But I think people had sort of just got used to it.
It was a lot more grim in film at that point. I mean, like you had things like Threads and the American one, The Day After, which was more of a harrowing sort of... It was just a visceral attack more than anything. Whereas the 50s had a lot of sort of tongue-in-cheek involved with it as well.
I suppose the other thing too is that I mean, Threads. My goodness, that's a difficult movie to sit through.
It's one of the most terrifying films I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, it starts off so normally. It could be a movie about anything, and then when the shit hits the fan, as such, I think one of the things that I found fascinating about that is you watch, the day after. The day after it's much cleaner. It's much more Hollywood.
It's more Americanized, yeah. American. Steve Guttenberg is in it, which gives you a rough view of how serious they take it.
Yes. But Threads, especially too, because Threads runs, up to 15, 20 years after the actual war.
Yeah.
And we get to sort of see what we think life would be like, 20 years into the future, not just a couple of days after, but, into another generation.
Horrific. It is absolutely horrific.
I actually do recommend that everyone actually go and watch Threads. But yeah, just
it's not for the faint of heart, that one.
no. It's not actually gory or anything like that, but my goodness, it's
very psychologically damaging. I'm still suffering the after effects of this.
Oh, we actually got shown Threads at school, I remember, and talked about a way to terrify school children. Oh my goodness, yes. Anyway, we're talking about the Blob. But there was another little very interesting thing, of course, because we know it's no great secret. They, of course, end up, freezing the Blob, and then they send it off they drop it off in the Antarctic, where it can, sort of
now
stay.
Sold at Walmart's for a limited period.
Yes.
Frozen Blob.
But there's a fascinating little bit right at the end where the police chief is talking to Steve McQueen, and he sort of says, "Oh, it should be safe there, up in the Antarctic, it stays frozen." And then Steve McQueen says, "Well, as long as the Antarctic doesn't melt." And then at the very end, you see it being parachuted down into the Antarctic with the word "end" with a big question mark.
Maybe they knew global warming was coming.
Well, I'd forgotten all about that little ending. And when I watched it again, and I sort of thought, okay, that's just too weird. That's
Maybe
just too out there.
Blob now.
Yes. It was just, I just sort of thought to myself, wow,
It could swallow a dolphin, and then the dolphin could be like, you'd have jumping blob going through the sea.
Oh. That's where you need, Mega Piranha versus the Blob.
Yeah. We're giving asylum ideas now. They should be paying them.
It's, there's another film too that I suppose if we're talking about the Blob and then we're talking about all the remakes of the Blob, we haven't, of course, mentioned The Stuff.
The Stuff, yes, which is very, very similar, but it's frozen yogurt or yogurt.
Yes. It's this goo that sort of gets mined up from the planet, but it's actually a living creature, and it's sold as this, yogurt ice cream type thing. Really, yeah. And then, of course, it takes over people's bodies. That was a great film, actually. I really enjoyed The Stuff.
A very silly one. Made by the same people who made Q the Winged Serpent. I think it's Larry Cohen.
There we go. I did like the ending, though, of The Stuff. The way it was payback time.
Yeah.
The way...
The thing is with The Stuff as well is, like, it looked gorgeous. I'd eat it.
It did look all right, actually, to be truthful, yeah.
Probably like shaving foam or something.
Well, it's interesting. It's like the smart kid in that movie, of course, pretended to be eating the stuff, but he was actually eating shaving cream, as I recall. Yes, so... anyway, but we should say, gee, we waffled on this one, but we should say The Blob, seriously, it's really good. It's so easily available. I mean, you can watch it online. It's available.
Survived since Criterion sort of released it back in the late 90s.
Yes, it's so really, if you haven't seen it, it really is a good one. It's a great Sunday afternoon movie. That's the way I always see it. Sort of maybe sit back and just put your feet up and just forget about life. It's not very long.
Find out what happened to the dark.
That's right. it's it's only about an hour and 20 minutes long, so it's actually pretty easy going. But no, definitely check out The Blob.
Oh, weird is careening off the track.
This is going to be a long edit.
Oh, that's staying in there.
Okay.
The Only Funny to Us podcast with brand new episodes every Monday night at 8 at onlyfunnytous.com.
Now, a bit of change of pace, because this is, I mean, remember, it's a cult movie, podcast. We talk about everything that's just weird and wild. And for me, you may have remembered back on podcast 2, I think it might have been, I mentioned a movie called Pacific Banana, which was meant to be the start of a new Australian franchise, which copied what we're about to talk about now. And that is, of course, Carry On. You can't have Carry On movies in cult. You talk about cult movies and you've got to have a Carry On. Don't you agree, Gary?
Yes, definitely. It's one of my favourite film series of all time. I'm actually really thrilled that we're talking about this today.
I have to admit that I know that, like the Carry On movies and comedians like Benny Hill and Frankie Howard and people like that are sometimes viewed as a little bit being sort of un-PC these days. But we'll talk about this in a minute, but I disagree. I think that they're really, really funny and really quite poignant. But anyway, we'll get to that in a second. But the movie that we're going to talk about is actually one of my favourite Carry-Ons, and I think it's one of your favourites as well, Gary.
It is. Yeah,
and that
my
is
second favourite Carry-On.
Oh, which is your favourite?
Carry-On Matron is my favourite.
Yes. I think it's the one that gets mentioned the most, actually. But I have to admit, this is actually my personal favourite, and it's Carry On Abroad. From 1972. And it was the 24th Carry On movie made in the series, and directed by Gerald Thomas. And it's just... sorry?
I said legend after you said
yes,
Gerald.
yeah. Oh, sorry. Sorry.
All right.
I think my headphones are playing up. It's fantastic. It's got everything that you would expect from a Carry On movie. So I suppose we'll just give you a quick rundown of what happens in this film, and then we'll talk about it a bit more, and then I think we'll just talk about Carry On in general, to be honest, because I think we need to sort of expand a bit beyond just this film.
Yeah.
But it basically starts off with our pub owners, one of which, of course, is the legendary Sid James and his wife. And every year they go on holidays, but they go on separate holidays. And because the idea is that they work in the pub together all the time. But the wife is very suspicious that, of course, our good friend Sid is, of course, being unfaithful when he's off on the holidays. So she decides that they're going to book a holiday together and actually go off to sunny Spain.
Bells.
Yeah, that's Hell's Bells, I know. Now, sunny Spain, of course, in this case is actually Pinewood Studios. But,
it is. It was filmed in the car park of Pinewood Studios. The cast thought they were all going abroad, and it turned out they were just going around the corner.
And there's so much to talk about with this. But when they, I suppose they get together and they go through a tourist agency, if you like, and they all meet up to go off to this club resort in Spain. But it's I think it's called Wonder Tours or Wunder Tours.
It is. It's Wonder Tours.
With led by the great Kenneth Williams, who's the tour guide. But and we've got some just classic, I suppose, Carry On characters or couples who are there. We've got, a problem couple where we've got the wife is totally overbearing and, totally dominates the husband. We've got two male friends who are travelling on this trip. One, of course, is straight, and one, of course, it was not actually said, but it's very heavily inferred that he's
hinted
gay.
at, yeah.
We've then got two young women who are on this trip to try to meet some young men. Yeah, well, you don't want to be in a Carry On movie if you want to meet young men, but anyway. And then we've also got a group of monks who were going on this tour. So they can go and see ancient Catholic ruins in Spain. And but when they get there, they find that the hotel is only half built. It's not actually finished. They get attacked by swamps of mosquitoes. There's I do remember they go off and they find a drink in a local market, which of course gives you X-ray vision, so you can see through women's clothes. They all end up getting arrested after a slight misunderstanding at a Spanish brothel.
It was very foreshadowing of the 18 to 30s experiences you'll get now.
It really was. And then, of course, it's... then they also find a love potion, a sort of Spanish fly love potion. And, of course, it all comes to a true crescendo when the hotel collapses down around them in their final scenes. There's nothing not to love about this. Wouldn't you agree, Gary? It's just got everything.
It's brilliant from beginning to end. I mean, even though it's one of the later entries in the Carry On series, it is one of its strongest. It's one that gets mentioned a lot. I mean, like, people forget that. I mean, that a lot of them started in the 50s, the Carry On movies, and they were very sort of more, I don't know, sort of family-friendly and twee. They were still funny, but they weren't the level of innuendo that you'd reached by the time Abroad came along.
I think that
it's just brilliant.
I think that once they got into, colour from black and white, it's sort of like if you remember, those early ones, which I think a number of the early ones, like Carry On Cabby, actually starred Leslie Phillips from memory, I think. And but once you get into the sort of the colourised films, it's like you're saying, there is so much innuendo. We're even starting.
It was when the changeover happened. There was a changeover at one point where it went from Amalgamated, which is sort of slightly Warner owned, and ended up moving to Rank. And it was between Screaming and Don't Lose Your Head. That's when the changeover happened, and you can tell in the differences between the two of those that the change had happened.
It's because they are quite different movies, aren't they? I think.
Yeah.
Also, the other thing too is that in a number of them we start to also get some nudity start to appear as well. Although that might just have something to do with the sign of the times, I suppose, more than anything else.
I mean, it was competing a lot with a lot of other saucier comedies that went a bit sort of further. I mean, the Confessions movies actually killed Carry On off in the end. I mean, that's why they did Carry On Emmanuel, which completely failed miserably. I mean, Kenneth Williams actually says that it was Robin Asquith's arse that killed Carry On.
Oh my goodness! I remember seeing Carry On Emmanuel, and I've got to admit, it wasn't really very funny.
It's very poor.
But one of the things I found, because that was after Sid James had died, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And there was something for me, I suppose, a Carry On movie without Sid James was just not really a Carry On movie. He was just he held.
Although
the
he
movies
wasn't
together.
in all of them.
No, he wasn't in the very early ones, was he?
He was in a few of the really early ones, but he did miss a few out here and there. I mean, there tend to be ones that people don't really sort of talk about very much, like Carry On Jack, Carry On Follow That Camel. He wasn't in that either. And I mean, that's a sign that people don't talk about those ones because he's not in it, I think.
Yes. Well, in fact, they replaced him with the Phil Silvers, I think, didn't they?
Yes, they did. And in Carry On Jack, they replaced him with Bernard Cribbins.
And it's there was something about Sid James I always really loved. I mean, I've loved a lot of his other movies. I mean, even outside of Carry On.
Lavender Hill Mob was a classic.
Lavender Hill Mob. But I love even a lot of his serious roles. He was actually a very good actor. He was a fantastic writer as well. It was. I mean, it's interesting that the story, of course, that the great British comedian Oh my goodness, my memory on this podcast, Gary. Hancock, Tony Hancock.
Tony Hancock.
Actually fired Sid James for being too funny.
Yes, he did.
Which
he did the same with Kenneth Williams as well.
Yes,
he didn't like to be overshadowed.
No, he was not a man who could accept the limelight being taken off him. But Sid James was so good. I mean, I love the TV series Bless This House.
Bless This House is amazing.
It was just a wonderful series, and the other thing too is it's such an interesting man too, Sid James. I mean, the fact that of course he's not British at all. He was actually South African.
South African,
and he originally wanted to be a hairdresser.
Yeah, indeed.
Of all things. And then along came the Second World War, and he went off and served with the South African Army, and then ended up emigrating to Britain, becoming an actor, and never going back.
Which is quite funny, really, when you look at it in a sort of 7 Degrees of Kevin Bacon sort of ways. Kenneth Williams, his dad was a hairdresser, and he wanted him to become one, but he didn't want to be a hairdresser. And Kenneth Williams does that whole thing. You got to have a trade, boy. You got to have a trade.
and Kevin Williams, of course, had a horrendous wartime experience because he was a prisoner of the Japanese, I think, for most of the war, and had quite a horrific time. All of the characters, there are so many people, though, in the Carry On movies who were just so brilliant. I mean, Hattie Jakes. Who doesn't love Hattie Jakes?
Hattie is my favourite Carry On member ever. That's why I like Carry On Matron so much, because it's a Hattie-centric film. I love Hattie. She's one of the most beautiful creatures that ever walked this earth.
She was absolutely amazing, and she was a very, very powerful woman, I believe, in real life.
Yes, she was.
She didn't take to sort of fools kindly, or
she didn't. But she was the kindest person you would ever want to meet. I mean, she used to invite everybody who was on their own around to her house for Christmas Day, and so they'd all be part of a family. And she was one of the most generous, giving people. But you're right as well. She wouldn't take no shit from anyone. She really wouldn't.
Absolutely amazing woman. I mean, but one of the things too I love is I remember seeing. I think it was Kenneth Williams being interviewed. Might have even been on Parkinson. And talking about a conversation he had with Sid James, and where they were talking about the fact that whether they were really overly happy with the product that was being produced in the Carry On movies, and Sid James apparently sort of said to him, "It's a yearly paycheck. It's work. Just don't worry about it. Just go with the flow." And
Kenneth never really liked it. It was. If you read his diaries, he has quite a lot of strong feelings towards the Carry On films.
But one thing that should be brought up, and I suppose we've got to deal with the PC concept, a bit like sort of Benny Hill and so forth. Many people sort of say, "Oh, these movies are so un-PC," that they're wrong.
They call them sexist and anti-women, which is ridiculous. Because if you look at the Carry On films, the women always end up like being better off than the men are anyway.
Well, it's very, very true. I mean, the women generally always win; the men generally always lose. It's a bit like Benny Hill. How often was Benny Hill ever the winner? You know, he was always sort of the loser. Sometimes he would win, but he would never win against a woman. He would only ever win against another man.
The only time he ever won against a woman was when that woman was a bloke in drag.
yes. I think that these movies sort of get treated very harshly like that. I mean, I suppose
then again, you can't say sneeze these days without a load of hay fever sufferers being triggered.
That's very true. I mean, that is very true. We do live in a society right now where it's hard to say anything without offending somebody. So do you get to a stage where you just shut up and say nothing? Which we never want to sort of have. But I mean, look, I can see that there are some points of view where there are some pretty sexist themes which are actually in some Carry On movies. I mean, the ogling of women's bodies and that sort of thing.
You've also got to put it into context of the time it was made as well. I mean, that's the important thing to do when it comes to especially comedies, British comedies from the 60s and 70s. You have to think about what the time was like at that point, and that's what society was like then.
No, that's very true, and I think it's one of those things where we need to judge movies or TV shows based on the time that they were made. We can't we can't take something from 1972 and then go and put 2016 values on it
No.
because the values were different back then.
Imagine what would happen if they showed like Love Thy Neighbour or Alf Garnett these days.
Oh my god! Well, actually, I'll tell you a story, Gary. Love Thy Neighbour was actually being played on Australian television last year, and there were calls for it to be taken off air because it was so offensive. And the network, which was the 7 network in Australia, 7 or 10, I can't remember, but one of the two, did actually then take it off the air. They actually sort of said, "All right, yeah, well, we won't play it." But for me, I actually think that's wrong because Love Thy Neighbour is not a pro-racist program.
No, it's an anti-racist program. You're supposed to hate the guy for treating his neighbours like that. That's
right, but just shot in a way that it still had to be humorous because they had to sell it to an audience.
Yeah, of course. I mean, if you look at a lot of them from that time period, I mean, Rising Damp had the same thing, but it was a lot clearer in Rising Damp that the black guy was like always going to come out on top anyway.
Yes. And that's the thing. I mean, it's like it's just to try to stop something just because we've changed our opinions on it now is I just think it's wrong. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm always going to watch Carry On films. I'm always going to watch the Benny Hill show. I love it when the Benny Hill show pops up on TV all the time. It's a little bit like, oh wow, I just sit back and pretend I'm 8 years old again.
Frasier, because she was one of the Benny Hill girls. I always try and look for her in the episode.
Oh, yes. Was she the one... which one was she?
Oh, I don't know, she just ran around a lot. Mainly in Frasier was Daphne.
Ah, okay. Yeah. Sorry, it took me a second to catch up there. I didn't realise that.
Mm-hmm.
I actually
everything links up on this show. We're good at this.
I know this is the reason why you're my main man. You're my man to go to.
I don't know why my brain retains this kind of information yet. I can't remember what happened yesterday.
I have to admit, that was something that I never knew. I really didn't know that actually. So there you go, listeners. See, listen to Gary, you'll learn something.
Yeah.
But
it's educational, this show.
But I have heard that there are plans to make another Carry On movie.
There is. Well, they made one in the 90s, Carry On Columbus, which gets a lot of hate, even though I don't think it's that bad at all. I actually think it's one of the better ones out of the later ones. But people instantly hated it because it didn't have any of the originals. There was a good reason for that. They were all dead.
Yes.
So you can't really judge the filmmakers too harshly on this. And I've got a feeling the same thing will happen with the new ones. I mean, they were doing Carry On London, weren't they?
Yeah, it's... I mean, there's so many great British comics who wouldn't have a problem doing a Carry On film. So, was it Carry On?
A lot of the greats were in Carry On Columbus. I mean, we had Rick Mayall in there.
The late Rick Mayall? Yes, absolutely.
Julian Clary, Richard Wilson.
And I thought it wasn't actually too bad.
One of my favourite lines from Carry On Columbus is Julian Clary goes up to one of the people in charge of the ship and says, "Oh, we just had a leak in the hold." And he says, "Oh, next time, do it over the side."
But Julian Clary was just made for Carry On, though, wasn't he? I mean, but I suppose to get back to Carry On Abroad, it's I know one of your favourite things in this is, of course, as you mentioned, Hattie Jakes, who plays the Spanish wife of the hotel owner, and who is, I think, the only line she just keeps repeating over and over in this movie is, "This bloody stuff."
The blooding stove. It's not working, the blooding thing. It's always blooding. It has to be blooding.
Bloody, yes.
Blooding.
And I don't think she has any other really serious lines, does she? In this movie,
Really,
it's just her either throwing things at her husband or doing battle with the stove.
Blooding stove.
Oh my goodness! But it actually does have some really quite funny bits in it. I mean, the fact that they're trying to deal with this half-built hotel, where often, it's missing glass in the windows. It's so there is a great scene, of course, where Sid James thinks that the glass, of course, isn't in the windows because it hasn't been there the whole holidays, and then at the very end, he goes to walk through the door, but of course the builders have just put the glass in. It's not some great stuff.
One of the greatest parts is it's more farce than Carry On. Really, it's where they all phone down to complain to the reception about their rooms, and all the lines get crossed. It is probably one of the funniest ensemble comedy moments of all time. It's so perfectly well done.
That is absolutely fantastic. Because we should say too, of course, that now I've forgotten the man who plays the hotel owner. I've forgotten the actor's name now, but he actually plays every part in the hotel. So he plays the porter, he plays the bellboy, he plays the reception, he plays room service, he plays the hotel manager. So he does every single part, and it's very well done.
Yeah, I mean, my favourite Peter Butterworth joke in Carry On Abroad is when Kenneth Williams goes up to him and says, "My name is Stuart Farquhar," and he goes, "Stupid what?" It's like Farquhar.
Oh, it is great. And the other thing for me too, of course, it stars one of my pin-up girls of when I was growing up, and that is, of course, Sally Gleason. So it's just, and she just absolutely fantastic. Who, of course, was in Blessed His House with Sid James. And it was, for me, I just don't, there just isn't one of her movies that I won't watch. Because I just grew up, sort of just being idolising, as a very young teenager, sort of idolising this woman. So it's just, there's so much in this film.
It's also Charles Hawtrey's final Carry On film. He got fired shortly afterwards for always being drunk. The character he's portraying in the film actually was what he was like in real life, and they saw him as too much of a liability and let him go. And he'd been there since the very first one.
Gee, that's sad, isn't it? That really is sad. But to test your knowledge, Gary, do you know which was the Carry On film that followed Carry On Abroad?
Oh, Carry On Abroad. Hang on. It would have been. Was it Girls? Carry On Girls?
Yes. I think you're right. I think you're right, actually.
But yes, it was Carry On Girls.
And that was actually quite a good one, Carry On Girls, I have to admit.
Around the contest.
And yes, with the beauty contest. Although one of the other ones I really did like is the is it Carry On Round the Bend? About the
Carry On at Your Convenience.
At Your Convenience, that's right.
Yeah.
That I actually really did love. I just loved it, obviously playing with the trade unions versus management thing all the way.
There's a lot of toilet jokes.
Oh, there are so many. The best
part about the film, though, is that they all go on a sort of works outing to Brighton, don't they? And they go on Brighton Pier and get completely drunk on this pier. And
they go to the shooting gallery, but end up shooting the pier up rather than the actual shooting gallery.
It's another Hattie Jakes role as well that she doesn't always get remembered for. She was another small part for Hattie Jakes in Carry On at Your Convenience. She's like Sid's downtrodden wife. And she's trying to teach the bird to speak. She's got this budgie and she's trying to teach it to speak. It's highly entertaining.
But of course, the budgie will, of course, a very important character actually, though, in the movie, because of course it's. Because the budgie will, of course, end up saving the day with its ability to be able to guess who's going to win the next horse race. It's
another thing very close to Sid's heart in real life.
Yes, it's no, that was a wonderful movie. I absolutely adored that one.
I adore Carry On Screaming as well.
Oh, that is good. That is good.
Carry On's parody of the Hammer horror movies, which were filmed before the way they filmed the Carry On films.
The only thing I have to admit is that towards some of the latter ones, I don't know if you found this. Did you ever start to get a little bit uncomfortable of the continual sort of pairing of quite young actresses with, shall we say, rather aging actors?
No, it doesn't affect me.
It never really worried you?
From a comedy point of view, I think it's hilarious because it's not realistic in the slightest. It would never happen. That's why you can't get offended by it, because of how out there it is.
Yes, it's always I thought just quite funny how these much sort of older men seem to be almost like idolised by these young women. It's
funny as well because you've totally asked the person who doesn't get offended by anything at all.
That is true. That is true. Well, I suppose we should take a quick break and
before we carry on. See what I did there.
Boom, boom.
Thank you.
That wasn't really good. How did Basil do it? He used to go, was it boom, boom?
That's Basil Brush for those of you below 30.
Yes, or didn't grow up in a Commonwealth country. Anyway, we shall be right back. Now, third movie for the podcast. Now, this is one that I have to admit I hadn't actually heard much about until Gary and I were actually having a conversation, and he said, "You've got to see this. You have to see this movie." And I did, and I am so grateful to Gary for putting me onto this.
You know how rare it is for somebody to say that after I recommend a film to someone?
Yes. Well,
you must see Shark and Soul Women's Prison Massacre, and they do. And it's like, did you enjoy it?
But you haven't led me astray once, Gary. Not yet, anyway. This is something actually we should talk about on another podcast, because I'm hoping that we can do a Attack of the Leeches trilogy at some stage, because there's actually been 3. The original and 2 remakes of Attack of the Giant Leeches, and I've seen 2 of them. Gary's seen 2 of them, but we've both seen the first. I haven't seen the second, but I've seen the third. I think, Gary, you've seen the first, you've seen the second, but not the third. I think that's right.
I'm a huge David Dakota fan, and David Dakota did the second one. So I actually originally watched the Dakota one before I saw the original.
Oh, did you? That's very interesting. I've got to admit, I was very lucky. I actually saw the original first, so it was. But then again, I'm going to watch them 1, 3, 2. So.
It doesn't make any difference.
But anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about Attack of the Giant Leeches. But what I am trying to say is that Gary has sent me in the way of some absolutely great ones. But one of the ones that Gary put me onto was a movie from Canada called Pontypool. And this is a movie that if you haven't heard of, because I reckon there's a good chance you may not have heard of this, you've got to see it. It is really, really, really good. It's from 2008, although I don't believe it actually got its official release until 2010.
On DVD it came out in 2010. It was released theatrically in Canada in 2009.
Yes, but I did read that apparently in 2008, I think it was released for the Toronto Film Festival.
Yes, it was.
Yep. And it's directed by Bruce McDonald, And it doesn't have many stars or many actors in this, I have to admit, but it does star Stephen McHattie, Georgina Riley, and Lisa Huell, and they're very good. Actually, they are really very, very good in this. It's basically the story of a small town radio station in the town of Pontypool, and the DJ, who has just started working there, is sort of like an ex-shock jock, I suppose you would say.
Yeah.
And he's got a job now in a sort of small rural sort of... well, I don't think the town's meant to be that small. It's still meant to be reasonably big, but it's not a major city.
It's not. I think it's sort of hinted at that it's sort of like a farming town, I suppose.
Yes, but not. Yeah, so it's like a second stage town, if you like, So, but it's meant to be set in the province of Ontario in Canada, and they start their breakfast shift, if you like, at about 6:30, I think it is, in the morning, and they have a few hiccups, about he's sort of running the show not really quite the way our producer wants the show to go, but they sort of get on top of that, because something starts to happen, and it's these weird stories that start to come in across the line about how these really weird events are starting to happen around the town. Now, the thing is that we don't get to see any of it. It's all actually brought to us by our sort of on-the-spot reporter, if you like. We'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a sec. And the story develops where we almost have a style of, I suppose, what you would say, zombie apocalypse starts to happen around them. And the movie is about how do they report it? How do they keep it on the air from their radio station? Are they safe themselves? Because that, about halfway through the film, where I'll tell you what, they're not as safe as they might have thought they were.
No.
So, and then, of course, can they survive? It is, in a sense, a sort of zombie apocalypse movie without really seeing the zombies.
It's probably the most intelligent zombie apocalypse movie I've ever seen.
It's one of the things that I have to admit about this movie is that it reminds me a lot of I think it was the 1939 H.G. Wells broadcast of War of the Worlds in New York.
38 Orson Welles.
38.
You were nearly there.
I was close.
This is a sad point, but I'm a War of the Worlds fanatic, and I know all these sad little details.
Oh, well, there you go.
The radio play word for word.
There you go. Gary is our go-to man.
Actually, the film was inspired by War of the Worlds.
It's well, you can see it. I mean, it's that also that idea of Orson Welles, the idea of staying on air. Because even as the movie, we're probably about 15 minutes into the movie, and I do notice that in this film, the producer is actually still not convinced that what they're hearing is real. That like they're actually being pranked, and the radio station is actually being pranked. But then, when their actual reporter starts to talk about what's really going on, and then they suddenly get this weird broadcast come over the air. Do you remember that, Gary? And it comes across in French.
Do. Yeah.
And this is sort of vitally important to our story because it's about how you get infected in this film.
I don't know whether I'm trying to avoid saying it because I don't want to ruin it for anybody.
I know.
I think it's the same thing.
I think maybe the best thing to say is, rather than explaining how this sort of zombie infection travels, is, shall we just say, emergency broadcasts for what's going on are being put out in French.
Yes.
But we're living in an English, well, it's Canada, it's bilingual, okay, fair enough, but it's still a predominantly English-speaking nation.
It's an English-run station,
yes.
Pretty much.
So let's just leave it there and you can use your imagination. It is. It's so hard to explain, isn't it, Gary? But
It really is.
It is, but I think, as you said, it is the thinking man's zombie apocalypse movie. Because it's not just as simple as somebody gets bitten and then someone else bites someone else, and then there's lots of running around, lots of chasing. You know, these people don't really know what's going on, but they're still trying to report it, and they're hunkered down in this radio station. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely fascinating, and watching them try to report it when they don't know what the hell they're actually reporting.
Yeah. I mean, I adore movies set in radio stations. I don't know why I always have done. Things like Dead Air, Talk Radio is another brilliant one. Basically, I love anything set in a radio station environment, and this one just sort of captures it perfectly. I think it's from doing the radio production course that I did at college, it looks pretty accurate as well. It's very believable how they've done it. You know, they've done a good job with it.
I've done a bit. Yes, the radio station does actually, for a very small radio station, which is only putting out ever one program at one time. It only has one recording booth. It almost
also
looks
the star of the film in its own little way.
Yes. It's the equipment. A lot of it looks like it's been purchased secondhand. You know, in fact, the studio itself is actually meant to be a retrofitted church, I think, which I also thought in itself was interesting, that they were taking refuge in a church.
Yeah, I think you exactly cottoned on to what they were aiming at there. Well done.
Oh, that's good. I noticed something.
It on you. That's good.
But it really does make you think a little bit. Some of you will possibly watch this and sort of say it's just too unrealistic. It just, the biology of it doesn't make any sense. But then again, can I just point out to anyone who actually thinks that, biologically, a zombie doesn't make any sense. Okay? I mean, if you're dead and your heart stops pumping blood, your muscles can't move, therefore you can't walk. So
you're telling me Santa doesn't exist now.
So, you know, look, in that sense, you know, I mean, who cares? It doesn't really matter, but I think what it's interesting about it is that there's almost that idea too that quite often we've created zombies through disease or through experimentation, you know, often in movies. But this is a little bit different. This is almost like our culture has created it.
Yes, I agree with that. I think there's also times when it felt kind of alien as well. I don't know whether they wanted to go down a sci-fi route with it at some point. But from what I can make out, it was originally going to be like a trilogy where the next one would explain it a lot more. But
well, I had heard that about the sequel being made. Do you know much more about that?
No, it was rumoured around a lot, and then it just sort of vanished. Perhaps if everybody listening goes out and watches it, we'll get it back on track.
We'll definitely do. This now, I'm not too sure how hard is this one to find, because I was very lucky. Gary actually shared his copy with me. But is it hard for people to find this movie?
No, it's relatively simple to find. You can pick up the DVD dirt cheap nowadays, secondhand, through Amazon sellers if you wanted to. I mean, I'm sure you could even get it brand new quite cheaply. With the fact that it's not a huge success, that lowers the price a lot, which is a good thing.
It's good for us.
I think it was on Netflix US for a while. I don't know whether it's still on there or not, and I won't go down that path again. I ranted about it last time.
Yes.
But it was on there.
It's definitely not on Australian Netflix. I know that
it's
for
not
a fact.
The British one either.
Be interesting. You know, if you're out there and you're listening and you're American, let us know so we can let everybody else know if it is on American Netflix. But one thing I suppose to say that if you're thinking that this is going to be a Canadian World War Z, or let's give it its proper title, World War Z, it's not. Okay, do not expect that sort of zombie movie. This is really a thinking person's movie rather than an action adventure movie. This is about trying to figure out what's going on when you're isolated and alone. The concept of your own survival. It's from a very different perspective. This is not a running, jumping, shooting, type zombie movie.
No.
It
is on Netflix US. I just checked online. It is on Netflix US.
Ah, there you go. Perfect. So, look, if you're in the US, check this one out. If you're outside of the US, check it out anyway. Just get on Amazon and buy it, because you won't be disappointed. The way I sort of feel about this movie, it's a bit like the movie we talked about last week, The Circle.
Yes.
It's The Circle was sort of sci-fi, if you like, but it was a real thinking person sci-fi movie.
Mm-hmm.
This is a zombie movie, but it's a real thinking person zombie movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's good for people who don't like full-on gore as well, that zombie movies tend to bring with them. This is one of the more intelligent zombie movies you'll ever find. And it's got some brilliant dark humour in it as well that keeps you laughing throughout, even when you shouldn't sometimes. There's a brilliant Bin Laden joke, which I'm not going to ruin here, but it was fantastic.
When they at the start of the movie, when they bring the sitting group in, I don't want to give it away. I want people to watch it. But the sitting group is just, even his reaction, when it's just, oh my goodness! Just trust us. It's so funny, but also because
unlike how shock jocks are portrayed in a lot of movies, not in real life because I'm a huge Howard Stern fan, but as they're portrayed in movies, they're usually quite unlikable and repellent people in movies. But yet in this, he is so brilliantly un-PC and lovable. You just instantly fall in love with the character. He is genius.
Well, he also plays a character who is. Very. But he's lovable, like you're saying. Yeah. There is something like there is a really good heart inside this guy. Mm-hmm. Now there is one thing we should mention without going into any detail about what you see, and that is that when you do watch it, you're going to have a really weird ending. Is all I can really say. Now, in a sense, you can watch this movie in two ways. Okay, you can watch it until the credits start to roll, and then we've got an ending which sort of makes sense. Then, as soon as the credits stop, we get about 2 minutes of footage. Gary, would you say?
Yes, which is straight out of Tarantino land.
It's. I still cannot find anybody online who can agree with what the hell actually happens in this 2 minutes. The 2 minutes apparently were meant to be actually put up before the credits, but then after, apparently it was shown at the Toronto Film Festival, they recut it and actually put it after the end of the credits.
It would have thrown the audience off even more at that point. I actually just see it as like a funny skit just to end the film, personally. I don't see it as anything in relation to the plot.
I've actually got a theory about what's going on, but it's a little bit hard to actually go into it because we've got to give the ending away to, with everyone listening. And this is a movie...
Tell me after.
I'll tell you once we've finished the show, but I've actually got my own theory on this. But look, definitely, Pontypool. This is one to must watch. And it is interesting, too, the way this movie just slowly starts to build. Like, it just builds and builds and builds. But all the way from the very start of the movie where when he's driving to work, he actually just finds this lone woman running through the countryside for absolutely no reason, all the way through up to our, basically crescendo of our apocalypse. Mm-hmm. It builds so well. And if you go into this is why we just cannot say too much, because you want to go into don't read a review of this movie before you watch it. Is what I'm saying to people. You want to watch this.
I went in completely blind and I adored it.
Yes, yes, you're going to know it's a zombie-style movie because as soon as you hit your Netflix thing, it's going to say that, right? But it's we've given you some information that's hopefully, sort of got your appetite going, but we don't want to give any more. We want you to now sit back, actually get the movie and watch it because you'll love it.
And let us know what you think.
Oh, absolutely. Feedback.
To quote the promotional material from Naked Gun 2, if you only see one movie this year, you need to get out more.
We already did our Basil Brush thing, didn't we? Oh, well. No, but definitely check this one out. Pontypool from Canada. It's, like a lot of countries, we always talk about British cinema and American cinema so often, and we forget about stuff that comes out of Europe. We forget about stuff that comes out of Japan, and this is out of Canada. It's fantastic. We forget just how much talent there is, in so many other countries. So, absolutely, check this one out.
I worked in the garden center, and a lady came in, and we had the flowers or the plants, and she asked me how much the chlamydias were.
The Only Funny to Us podcast, available now at onlyfunnytous.com.
Now, lastly, number 4 is a movie from the United Kingdom. And that is, it's horror from the United Kingdom. And I've got to admit, I reckon the Brits they're back, Gary. After all that, the horror hammer and everything, I reckon lately Britain's been putting out some really good horror films.
I had such a weird time with British horror for a while where I completely fell out of love with it. I was so fed up of it, I thought it was crap. I thought the output was terrible because I'm very Americanized anyway, as anybody will tell you. I'm like the most proudest non-American American ever.
Yes.
But I felt completely out of love with British horror for a very long time until this came along and completely made me reevaluate everything.
Well, there are 2 movies, for me anyway, which I think really changed British horror. And they're actually by the same director. And that's, of course, Neil Marshall. And he originally made Dog Soldiers in 2002, which I still love that movie.
I've got to watch it again because I remember not enjoying it very much, so I've got to give it another go at some point.
I think one of the things I loved about Dog Soldiers is that it's one of those cross-genre movies. It's like 50% horror, 50% war. Because, let's face it, the British film industry can't really afford to make big-budget war movies anymore. So it's like they did in the 60s and all that sort of stuff, where it's Dog Soldiers was the ability to cross-genre. So, because if you watch it, it's actually the story of the Zulu War, of Rorke's Drift in 1876, I think that was, or 1879. And they even make mention of it in the movie. Yeah. So and they just simply replace the enemy, or the Zulus in that case, with werewolves, which is I thought really, really quite interesting. But we're not talking.
I think the reason why I didn't get into it as much is because I have issues with films with predominantly male casts. I don't know why. I mean, it's the reason I don't like John Carpenter's The Thing very much, even though it's highly regarded and loved. I have to have strong female-centric characters. I don't know why. Perhaps it's just... I think it's maybe because I was brought up... My area of horror is the slasher genre, where the women are always the strongest and most entertaining characters. Perhaps it's because of that. I don't know.
Well, that's very true, because, in slasher movies, you have such a big female cast. Where, yes, of course, Dog Soldiers only actually has one woman in the entire movie. So,
and John Carpenter's The Thing has none.
Yeah, quite correct. Oh, until we go to the remake, which
was brilliant, by the way. I watched recently.
Oh, which I shouldn't really call it a remake because it's actually a prequel.
It's a prequel. Yes, it's a prequel.
Because of course it finishes with the exact scene where John Carpenter's movie starts. So it's which has always brought up an interesting point for me. If you're saying to people, watch the Thing, should they watch the newer one first? And then watch John Carpenter's, so they actually play in order.
Silence of the Lambs. I do. It's like if I watch the Silence of the Lambs trilogy now, I will always put Red Dragon on first, and then go into Silence of the Lambs.
Yes, well, even Star Wars. What order do you watch them in? because you've got the prequels and then you come afterwards. It's
with Star Wars, if you can make it through the first three, you'll be very heavily rewarded by the decent three that come after.
Oh God! What's it? Star Wars #1, which was movie #4. It's 2.5 hours of talking about a trade war. I mean, it's like watching the economics channel. It's just so dull. But
presidential debate, the movie.
Oh, I know. Although they're a little bit more excited this time around, I have to admit, than we have got in the past. But we have digressed before we've even mentioned what the movie is, and that is, of course, one of the reasons why I think Gary likes this one a little bit more. Is because it's got an all-female cast, and it is actually called The Descent from 2005. Now, a lot of people, I think, actually thought that this was an American movie when they first saw it, just with a bit of a British cast. But it is actually a full-on British film, and it was, in fact, all shot in Scotland, from what I believe.
That's why the actors look very cold.
Yes, well, it's although I do believe that the outer shots were actually filmed in the US.
I think there was a few pickup shots.
Yes, I think that might be all it actually is. I do have a feeling though that was The Descent, and we're not going to talk about this movie, but there is a sequel called The Descent 2. But I don't know if that was actually filmed in the US, even though it's still a British film.
I'm not sure. I'll have to look that one up.
Yeah, but anyway. So our movie stars Natalie Mendoza, who I think is actually an American, not actually British, Shauna McDonald and Alex Reed. They'd be the three biggest cast members. There's obviously quite a few more. But they're the ones who I suppose you'd know or recognise, especially from other movies. Now, it's basically starts off with a group of girlfriends, I suppose, if you like, who are very much into action extreme sports. And the film starts in Scotland, which is conveniently seen as filmed there. And after a whitewater rafting expedition, our main star, Shauna McDonald, who plays the character Sarah, is on her way home with her husband and I think it's daughter or son, I can't quite remember, but a very young child. And they're involved in a car accident where her husband and child are killed, and she's the only one who survives. And the movie then takes off a year later, where her friend Natalie Mendoza tries to get the gang back, if you like, back together, and they head off to the United States to go on a potholing expedition.
What could possibly go wrong? So
what could go wrong here? That's exactly right. And, well, of course, things do go terribly wrong, as Natalie Mendoza, who plays the character of, I think it's Juno, I think she's called, she decides to take action-adventure just a little bit too far and actually doesn't set out when you go potholing, you have to sort of put a plan out, so the police or whatever. So if you don't come back, they know where you are. Well, she doesn't actually lodge one. So no one has any idea that they actually go missing when they go potholing.
And people wonder how these characters get themselves into these situations.
Oh, I know. And not only that, she takes them down the wrong potholes. So the wrong sort of, caverns underground. She tells them they're going down one which has been mapped, but this is actually an unmapped one. So, of course, they get lost very, very quickly when they're underground. And then things start to go terribly wrong when they realise they're not alone in these caverns. There is this... Oh, yes. There's this weird sort of race of creatures. They're sort of humanoid, but they're not human. Whether they're meant to be some old species from the past that we don't really know about, or whether they're just meant to be humans who have gone down there and maybe changed. I don't know. What did you think?
I think they're prehistoric. I think there's even bits where there's like there's like cave drawings on the wall. I think it was supposed to be implied that they were prehistoric, lived underground, hence the reason why they were pretty much sort of mole-ish, if in a way, if you will.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. It's the way I see
Something
it as
that
well.
didn't fully evolve.
Yes, it's just another species of human which has evolved underground rather than on top of ground. But they're very, very aggressive. They're 100% carnivorous. And
They're called the crawlers.
Oh, and I'll tell you what, there are some pretty freaky scenes in this. I think the freakiest scene, which is so freaky, they actually copied it almost 100% when they did The Descent 2. So they obviously thought they were on a winner with this scene. And it's when they are lost, they're totally in the dark, they find themselves in a cavern underground, and they're zooming around with the infrared on their camera. And suddenly a face just appears on the camera, but you can't see it because it's dark. It's very, very well done. And then it just basically just runs through the group. And then, of course, from that point on, they start to be hunted down, one by one. What are your thoughts here, Gary? I mean, did you find it scary, spooky, or did you just find it more of a bit of a sort of slasher survival style movie?
I sort of found it scary-ish, not in the sort of traditional scary, but more in the fact that it's very claustrophobic. It has you on edge. I mean, anybody who has like claustrophobic issues will probably have a few issues with this film. I mean, I had the same with Kill Bill 2. Remember where she was buried underground? I was like, breathe. It's that kind of feeling. It's a very claustrophobic and spooky sort of feeling. And when you're sitting there trying to work out how the hell are they going to get out of this one, and your brain can't really fully comprehend how they're going to go about this, which makes you even more tense. And it's very well done. I mean, I think if Hitchcock saw it, he would have been quite proud. Let's put it that way.
One of the things I found is that in this, the one we're talking about, The Descent, it's when they're actually climbing through the tunnels, they literally are squeezing through tunnels. Now, yes, they're artificially made, of course. They didn't actually go down into caverns.
Unlike the actresses, you couldn't have fitted artificially made actresses down those holes.
No.
Great detail.
But it's oh God. But it really, as Gary said, you do feel so claustrophobic with it. When you're watching it, you really will believe that they're underground.
Yes.
The set is so well done, because one of the problems is when they make the sequel, The Descent 2, is that the underground footage is almost a bit more. It feels a bit like Doctor Who-ish. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
it doesn't feel quite as real.
Too much. It doesn't have the same claustrophobic feel as the original.
And it was a different director, and I think that could have something to do with it.
I think it's down to directional things, but you see it a lot in a lot of horror movies and their sequels. It's like when the budget goes up, they spend more time on the sets and lighting, whereas the original, which hardly had any money, had to make do with what they had. And I think that's where the problem comes in, whereas the original was claustrophobic because it was probably cheaper to do it that way. And by the time the second one came along, they had a bit more money pumped into it, and it ruined the effect.
Yes, no, yeah, I couldn't agree more. I totally agree. One of the things,
the best way of comparing that is Halloween 1 and Halloween 2. Even though it's the same night and it does flow perfectly, it feels too wide, Halloween 2. It doesn't feel closed in.
That's spot on. That's absolutely spot on. And you'll find exactly the same thing, as we're saying with this, is if you do go off and then go and watch Descent Part 2, you even though it's meant to be set 24 hours later, it is a totally different feeling to the whole film. It feels so different. But there is a thing too about this is that with our women who are underground, is that there is something that one of our main characters, Juno, does during a fight with the creatures, and it brings up the point which seems to run through this movie all the way through, and that is that idea of what would you do in this situation? Would you totally be looking out for yourself and your own survival to try to get out of these tunnels, or would you stay put with your friends and try to defend your friends to get as many people out as possible? And we have a couple of different characters in this movie that once the shit hits the fan, they don't necessarily...
It doesn't just hit the fan, breaks up into bits and hits the audience in the face.
Yes. This one gets a little bit gory and a little bit bloody. But it is interesting. You sort of have to ask yourself, how would you behave in this situation? Would you sort of try to save your friend, put your own life at risk to save your friends? Or would you literally just abandon them and say, right, I'm on my own, I'm going to get the hell out of here? And we do see that.
Friends. Yeah.
Yes, you always get new friends. But there's this event that Juno does with Alex Reed, who plays the character Beth, will totally change what our main actress Sarah does for the rest of the film. It happens about halfway through, and let's just say that someone is misidentified during a fight. That's sort of acceptable. That could happen in the dark in this sort of situation. But it's what our character Juno does next, which will totally change everything for Sarah, and that thing will be carried on into Descent Part 2 as well. It's good. It's scary. It's claustrophobic. It's dark. It's damp. It's cold. I'd quite like
got a little bit of trivia about it, if you want to know trivia, Gary.
Absolutely.
We need like a little jingle.
Yes. We'll make one. We'll make one for next show.
This was released just before the London bombings in the UK on July 7th, 2005. And all the advertisements on London Transport and on the tube said outright terror, bold and brilliant. And it depicted a terrified woman screaming in a tunnel. I'm reading this. The film's theatrical distributor in the UK, Pathé, recalled the posters from their placement in the London Underground and reworked the campaign to exclude the word terror from the reviews due to the terrorist attack that had just happened. And in turn, it did actually damage the movie. The timing of it damaged the box office for the movie.
Wow. I had no idea about that. That's
you ruined the Descent.
Yes, bugger you, Al Qaeda.
The same thing happened in the US just before 9/11, which is coming up soon. Actually, just before 9/11, they released a movie called The Shaft, which was a remake of a Norwegian film about killer elevator. It is as cheesy as it sounds, but it's done in a tongue-in-cheek way, and it was riddled with comments like in the movie, there's an explosion in the elevator shaft, and one of them says, "Is it Bin Laden?" Things like that. This was released the day before 9/11, and then 9/11 happened, and he just died completely. And that is another one that's worth looking out for because it is a good one. It's got Naomi Watts in it, but unfortunately, the timing of the release completely ruined the entire film.
That's such a shame,
because of that event. I mean, I'm not saying like the film is more important than the event. I'm not saying that.
No, of course not. Of course not.
That sometimes life has a ironic way, just to quote Alanis Morissette there, without realising it until it comes out. Life is a funny way. That these films just happen to be around at the time when this kind of event happens. It's very unfortunate. But The Descent was a sufferer of that in the UK, and it was a long time before it got released in the US as well. It came out about 2 years later, I think, in the US.
Didn't the same thing happen with the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie Collateral Damage? Didn't that have to be postponed?
Yes, it did. Yes.
Because I think that was meant to be released around the time, I think, of 9/11. And they made a conscious effort to, I think, basically postpone it for 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
It's the fascinating stories. One of the
it's
things...
it always seems to happen to the best films.
Actually, I quite like Collateral Damage, actually. It's
a good film. It's one of Arnie's strongest. I think it's down to the fact that he was a firefighter in the movie, that it was a bit too close to home.
Yeah, see, there you go. There's just another bit of, it's just what are the odds, that they make Arnie a firefighter? It's, but it's just the ironies of life, isn't it? That these things, irony's not actually the right word, but it's, these things are actually going to happen from time to time. But
if you get the conspiracy theorists, they'd be like, "Oh, Hollywood knew."
Oh, that's right. Yes. It's like they were telephoning all the Jews before it came, the day before it came down, and
yeah. Let's go through every episode of The Simpsons and look for the faintest bloody resemblance.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Anyway, that's something for a different podcast, I think. But the other thing too, just want to let people know about this movie is that there are two different cuts of The Descent, and there is a British cut and there is a US cut. Now, the only difference between them is the ending, literally the last 5 minutes. So, if you...
Unfortunately, though, it's the extended ending you need to understand the sequel.
That's exactly right. So, if you intend to just watch this and you have no intention of watching The Descent Part 2, watch the American one. It's fine. All right? It makes total sense. If you're intending on watching The Descent Part 2, you must watch the British version because otherwise it won't. The sequel doesn't make any sense whatsoever.
Not at all. Apparently, the North American unrated DVD includes the original ending.
So it does come with it.
Which is the one which doesn't make sense.
Oh, sorry, with the American one. Sorry, yeah. It's I do know that apparently the version which is on Netflix is the one you want.
Yeah. It's also the same as the UK DVD release is the same as well.
So, but just to warn people, that there is this slight issue with the ending, which, as we said, if you have no intention of watching the sequel, it doesn't make any difference.
I'm sure both versions of the ending are on YouTube as well, so I'm sure if you've seen one, you can look up alternate ending and just see the other one.
Yes, That's always the way. That's always the way. But
I'm being distracted. Magic Mike 2's on TV. I'm like, hello.
Oh, is this? we better make a wrap up then. I think.
What's for the wet shiny ending? What?
Oh dear. Yeah. So look, definitely. Look, I really do like this one. I think it's worth seeing. So now check it out.
Magic Mike 2, brilliant.
So, you're going to get me started to talk.
We should totally do Magic Mike one day.
Oh, we should. We should just do I still want to do Showgirls.
Yeah, Showgirls. We need an exploitation day where we can do Showgirls, which is the female sort of exploitation. We could have Magic Mike male exploitation. We could have Coffee with Pam Grier. Then we've got Blaxploitation.
Yes, Blaxploitation.
And there's the Nazi exploitation movies like Ilsa.
Oh, we can make a real show out of that, actually.
Oh, we could. We could have an exploitation week.
Well, let us know, everyone. Do you want us to do an exploitation week? Because I'd love it.
Do you want us to exploit you one week?
Yes, I reckon that'd be great fun. That'd be fun. I'd love to do that. I'd absolutely love to do that. But anyway, that was The Descent. I suppose we should really come to a wrap. I think we've been waffling for so long.
I think they want to hear us talk for hours.
Well, I still want to do a Sheena Tweet the Jungle entire podcast. Just talk about everything Sheena. But
that really grabbed you, that one, didn't it?
Sheena for me is still. I don't know why I love it so much.
You have a definite hard spot for that, don't you?
I was going to, maybe spot isn't the right word. The other one maybe comes into mind, but that
reminds me. Big shout out to Jim Wynorski. Love that man.
Oh, yeah, we do. Oh, most definitely. We've got to talk about more of his movies, actually.
We do. That's the thing we're planning. We're planning a Wynorski week.
Oh, that definitely we will do. We will do. So, look, I suppose, we'll come to an end because we have been going on for quite a long time. I suppose, shout-outs to everybody who has helped and just that we want to give them out to. Of course, the Only Funny to Us guys, please... check them out at OFTU Podcast. Do a great show, and of course they help with this show quite a lot. Do the intro and just also great with advice and helping out in other areas. So please check them out. Alana Evans, of course, always want to say a big thank you and shout out for allowing us to use her music. So please follow her and check her out as well. Also, if you go to her Twitter pages, you can find the links to her podcasts talking about... I'm sorry, my voice is about to go. Just give me 1 second.
I'll just praise Alana while you go.
Alana, go for it, Gary. Go for it.
Hey, girl, how you doing? I'll leave a gap so you can answer me.
There we go. So...
I'm having a conversation, Warren. We're having a conversation. How rude. How dare you, Alana, block me?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I felt I was just going to die then because I had this...
You're just joking to death. Well, I'll get to him in a minute. So, how you been?
Oh, my goodness. Sorry about that, guys. I started to cough, took a glass of water, and then it went down the wrong way. So I do apologise for that.
It's Australia. Everything's upside down.
That's right. So, yes, as I said, please check out her Twitter page. There's all the links there to her own podcast, her video gaming podcasts. So check that out. Of course, they're sorry?
I said, and they're awesome.
Oh, good. I thought you said something else there for a second.
What did you think I said?
Oh, no, don't worry.
I read to think what the hell you
thought. Of course, please check out Big Bro Radio on Twitter as well, bigbrotherradio.com, where, of course, you'll find the podcasts with Gary, Doc, and a number of others talking Big Brother and various other subjects. So please check that out. Of course,
I have another one as well I need to promote as well.
Oh, you go for it, Gary.
On Tuesday night, me and Doc from Big Bro Radio are going to be doing Eyes Wide Open, more of a political debate show, and that's going to be at 8 p.m. He's put EST, so that's Eastern Standard Time, I think, which is 1 a.m. my time. Yay, me, late nights.
So Eastern Standard Time, that's US Eastern Standard Time, just to let...
Yeah, 1 a.m. That's on Tuesday night. If you follow Big Bro Radio, he'll tweet out the link on the day.
Yeah, so, and the Twitter address is, it's just Big Bro Radio, isn't it, I think? Or one
That's
word?
One, yeah. Or if you get lost, just follow me at GJ69.
Yeah, and all the links will be there. And, of course, always remember Gary's horror writing at Go For It, Gary.
It's Body Count Rising, which is bcrising.com. I've got to review 3 Arrow Blu-rays coming up, and Arrow pack these things with so many special features and alternate cuts of films that I'll be watching the same film all day going, I want to die. But yes, that's coming up, so go visit the site.
So everybody please do that. Of course, follow Gary on Twitter at GJ69. You can, of course, follow me as well at Martini Superdry. And, of course, you can follow this podcast on Twitter at The Zaius Report.
You know, on Facebook earlier on, I was doing a promotion that I was going to be on this today, and I tried to spell it about 8 times and I forgot, so I just put, doing a show with Warren. I can't spell Zaius. I need to learn this.
Zaius, yes, but you're a Planet of the Apes fan.
I haven't seen them since I was a kid. I should really go back and watch them again. I remember it's the one that looks like Janet Jackson. You know, it's an uncanny resemblance.
Yeah. Don't be careful how you say that, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
No, I don't mean that. I mean, like the nose and everything. It's Janet Jackson after the work had been done. It's that.
No. Don't worry. I get what you're saying. No, absolutely.
No, I never do that. I hate everybody equally. I never put anybody first.
But there's such great films. I mean, what the 5 original movies. There's the TV series, of course, that came as well. I'm still not a huge fan of all the remake movies. I will have to admit, because I think they just lost the plot of what was going on. But hey, that's just me. You know, I prefer the originals.
Plot?
The plot? Planet of the Apes had a plot?
I don't watch anything. What are you talking about?
What if I have to admit, by the time they got to Planet of the Apes 3, it was getting pretty out there.
Have they done Planet of the Apes in space yet? Because that's the one I'm waiting for.
They do travel back in time. So we've got time travel. Just what is it? Planet of the Apes 1 is Charlton Heston, where everyone knows that. The number 2 was pretty much just one remade with a different actor, to be honest. And then instead of finding, the Statue of Liberty, they find an atomic bomb being worshipped by these leftover humans who were living underground, mole people.
It wasn't North Korea, was it?
Yeah, it probably
it's all right,
was.
I won't hear it. They haven't got the internet.
And then 3, they go back in, they pull the spaceship out of the lake and then travel back in time to Earth in the 1970s. And then was it number 4, Cornelius starts up a trade union movement in New York or Los Angeles and gets all the apes. Oh, God.
You know what's just reminded me? Do you remember that Hammer Horror Dracula movie where Christopher Lee's Dracula ended up in the 70s?
Yeah.
The most bizarre.
Oh, my goodness. Anyway.
That's what we need to do at some point. Anyway, go on.
We've got more movies sort of like piled up, ready to do. Maybe, actually, here's another thing too, guys. Let us know if we waffle too much, if we ramble too much. Let us know. And if
you want Warren to shut up and just hear me, that's fine.
Yes,
he won't be offended. Just let me know.
No, let me know that too. I do tend to ramble. All my friends will tell you that. Gary will tell you that very loudly. But let us know too if you want us to maybe cut it back, do a few more films, be a bit more on point. If you like the waffling and the extra stories, let us know. In other words, just give us some feedback and let us know what you think. That'd be really good. So, I reckon we're done.
Woohoo!
So, thanks for listening.
Hear the sighs of relief from everybody listening.
Yes,
they checked their iTunes about 10 minutes ago going, how long's left?
Yeah, I know, are they still going on? I thought they said they were finishing 10 minutes ago. Anyway, thanks for listening, guys. This was, of course, podcast number 9 of the Zaius Report. We'll be back next week with podcast number 10. So please join Gary and I with some other great cult classics. And we will leave you, as always, with the lovely and charming Alana Evans. So it's a goodbye from me.
Goodbye from me.
And we'll... Oh, yes, you missed that joke. And you told me that you just watched Porridge as well.
I know, I'm so sorry.
Oh, well, never mind. Anyway...
It's like 3:15 in the morning, people. Do what he makes me do. 3:15 in the morning.
I'm so cruel.
Send
cruel.
all donations. Play Sarah McLachlan's Angel. I'm about to do an appeal.
I'm so cruel, but he loves every minute of it.
I do.
Anyway, we shall talk to you next week. Bye now.
You